Well, someone must have summoned the dragon, 'cause I'm back in business. I'm back. No, I'm Jack actually. Today, to celebrate the occasion, I thought we'd talk about something a little bit different and something that is very near and dear to my heart. Akira Toriyama, hot off the success of his hit series Dr. Slump, had grown tired writing a single series and wanted to create something fresh. Taking inspiration from Journey to the West and 80s kung fu movies, the very first chapter of Dragon Ball was bestowed upon weekly Shonen Jump readers December 3rd, 1984. With sales topped only by that of One Piece, Dragon Ball has since become a cultural phenomenon and a gateway anime for many across the world. The anime, however, is not what we're going to be talking about today. No, instead I thought we'd take a look at some of the many video games based on this beloved franchise, starting with the Dragon Ball Z Budokai Trilogy. Upon starting up Budokai 1, you'll be greeted with a 6th generation recreation of the original Japanese intro with the backing track Rock the Dragon and the legendary Chala Head Chala for the US and Japanese versions respectively. Looking back, it's incredibly dated now, but I'm sure for a Japanese audience this would have been a huge rush of nostalgia. Story mode is the primary method of unlocking the game's many characters. You'll take control of the Z Fighters and participate in the many battles found in the show, from the Saiyan Saga all the way to the Cell games. Dragon Ball Z Budokai is a bare bones but albeit faithful recreation of the Dragon Ball saga with a lot of the fat trimmed. While later DBZ games would take these same 4 arcs and run them into the ground, I'm going to let Budokai off the hook here. Budokai 1's cutscenes have much better production values compared to games released in the 6th, and embarrassingly enough, even the 7th generation. The PS2 is obviously not going to be able to recreate the anime's most iconic scenes one-to-one. Despite that though, it does an admirable job nonetheless. Your first run through of the story will be through Goku's perspective, essentially missing 80% of the actual plot. Once the credits roll though, you'll be able to go back and play extra scenarios through characters like Vegeta or Piccolo. There are even a few what if episodes if that kind of thing tickles your fancy. My favourite one is when Cell accidentally absorbs Krillin and royally fucks up Yamcha. Sprinkled between each fight are little minigame challenges. They don't occur very often, but when used effectively, they can actually enhance the narrative. Like using Goku's trip to Namek as an excuse to teach you about more advanced techniques. The only one I don't like is this one with Piccolo. You have to rotate the control stick to charge the special beam cannon. If you fail, Piccolo just straight up has a heart attack. This was the very first Dragon Ball game to use the Funimation voice cast. In the American version at least. Elsewhere, the only option you've got is the original Japanese actors. I love both, so it isn't a deal breaker for me either way. Budokai features a roster boasting over 20 characters. All of your favourites are here. Goku, Vegeta, Krillin, Dodori, what the fuck. One of the reasons why I find traditional fighting games like Street Fighter kind of intimidating is the sheer amount of combos and unique special moves for each character that you have to learn. Rather than your traditional quarter circle forward movements, this game instead opts to have the player string together a combination of punches, kicks and key attacks in order to pull off a special. The Kamehameha, for instance, is 5 straight punches and then a key attack. In order to perform said attack, however, you'll need to make sure that you have the correct amount of ki. Ki is essentially your special gauge, represented underneath your health bar. The meter will gradually fill up when you start throwing punches. You can also charge the meter by holding guard and double tapping the opposite direction you're facing. Double tapping a direction on the D-pad will have you dash at your opponent. R2 is your heavy attack, especially useful during air combat. Should 2 characters use a heavy at the same time, a clash is triggered. Whoever rotates the control stick fastest wins the clash, adding some of that cinematic DBZ flair. Flight combat is extremely clunky and random as to when it happens. There's no real way to trigger it, nor is there any way to adjust your height manually, even making Cybermen a pain in the ass to fight. By clearing story mode and other challenges, you gradually unlock capsules, which gives moves for each fighter, so the player isn't immediately overwhelmed. Where Budokai starts to fall apart, however, is when you try and look at it through the lens of a competitive fighter. I will say this right now, unless you're made by Arxis, Dragon Ball Z games are not, and never will be, competitive fighters. Nor are they really concerned with being one. They are Dragon Ball games first and foremost. The specials can be incredibly telegraphed. That's even if you have the opportunity to finish the command in the first place. In a competitive fighter, special moves need to be performed on the fly in order to keep the game fun and frantic. Part of the enjoyment that comes from fighting games is that mental battle of trying to figure out what it is your opponent is going to do based on their current predicament. The Spirit Bomb, the Big Bang Attack, the Special Beam Cannon, it's all here. The main issue is that for an ultimate attack, they don't really pack much of a punch. Not only is there a delay between firing one off, but when it does connect, you don't really get that much oomph from it, you know? These are attacks that in the show could potentially be earth-shattering, but in this game, If this game had a tier list, it would go something like Super Saiyans, Frieza and Cell, and everyone else below them. So in many ways, it's just like the show. Most characters have at least a minimum of one transformation. In order to activate said transformation, you not only need the correct amount of ki, but you also need every transformation capsule below the one you're currently using. Goku, for example, will need to have Kaioken's 2, 4, 10 and 20 before finally ascending to Super Saiyan. You activate your transformations by holding down all the face buttons. Problem is that once your ki drops below a certain threshold and you get knocked down, which is very easy to do might I add, you'll drop down to the previous form. The forms themselves also guzzle ki like the Z Warriors and Senzu beans, so keeping a steady supply is not easy to do. Ultimately, I just think it's more efficient to use those capsule slots on extra moves rather than take your chances with a potentially game-ending transformation. World Tournament Mode is where you take part in the titular Tenkaichi Budokai. If you get knocked off the fighting stage, you lose, so you've really got to think about your position in this one as well as the force of your attacks. The tournament arcs were always one of my favourite parts of the original Dragon Ball series, so I've got a soft spot for this mode. Ranking high in the tournament will give you Zenny, which you can then use to purchase new capsules, as well as extra costumes for the characters. I have to say though, I am severely disappointed at the lack of Snapback Cap Piccolo, aka the best part of the show. Budokai certainly won't be winning any awards in the graphics department anytime soon, that much is evident. But I won't lie, I still think it looks pretty decent. Not great, but good. The GameCube version was also updated to have a cel-shaded art style to keep consistent with the PS2's release of Budokai 2. I've always been a fan of how the menus looked as opposed to 2 or 3, those games aren't bad, but this one has so much more charm with fully drawn portraits of all the characters to represent each of the game modes and little chibi icons for every character on the select screen. It's very Toriyama, I love it. I'll be blunt with this one. Dragon Ball Z Budokai is way off from being considered good, let alone great. If you're looking for a good fighting game to play with your mates, then I just can't recommend it to you. It's far too clunky and one-sided for that to be the case. As one of the best ways to experience the DBZ story in a video game form, that is the only way I can suggest giving it a look. In other words, it's for the fans only. Dragon Ball Z Budokai 2 landed in holiday 2003 for the PS2 and again 1 year later for the Nintendo GameCube. Like last time when you boot up the game you're treated to an intro, only this time this one contains actual animation exclusive to the game. The game now sports all the characters from the Majin Buu saga along with new transformations, Super Saiyan 2 and 3 for Goku, as well as Super Saiyan 2 and Majin Vegeta for the Prince of Pride himself. Fusion capsules allow you to combine two characters together to make the likes of Vegito or Gotenks. Also included are what if fusions like Tiancha, a fusion between Tien and Yamcha which I want to eradicate from my memory immediately. Dragon Ball fusions would take this concept and go to town with it. Dragon World is some kind of board game, I guess? You move your pieces and challenge other fighters while you try to reach the boss of that board. It sounds fun on paper, but trust me when I say paper itself is more fun than this mode. The beginning boards aren't so bad since they're smaller and there are less fights per board. Once you get into the latter half, however, it drags out longer than Goku's trip to Snake Way, longer than Planet Namek's destruction. I fucking hate this mode. Most characters you have to fight have 2 or more hit points, meaning that you have to curb stomp them multiple times. There are special spots which do change up things a bit, like starting with half health, but that's not enough and only serves to highlight the repetition of the fighting mechanics. I mean, you can fire off your primary specials on the fly now, so that's an improvement. Did they also mention that this is your primary way of unlocking characters? Because of course it fucking is. The execution of these unlocks is also a little iffy. Having more toys to play with requires that you at least have competent knowledge of the source material, which inherently limits this game's appeal. For example, you need to make sure that Krillin dies at the hands of Frieza in order to unlock Goku's Super Saiyan transformation. I would give a spoiler warning for that, but Krillin dies every other Tuesday, so... Replayability is a factor, sure, but that's assuming anyone would want to replay this, which I don't. Ever. That, folks, was Budokai 2. Yes, we are already wrapping this up. This game is like that kid in school who fails on their first assignment, only instead of polishing it up, they instead decide to add a couple of lines and then submit it again, expecting to get a pass. Only the stuff that they did change actually made it worse. That's pretty much Budokai 2 in a nutshell. The first game only got a pass because of its story mode. With that now gone and the fight mechanics pretty much untouched, there's really no reason to pick up this game, not even for fans. Sure, they've got an updated roster, but Trilogy means 3, so that hardly means much now. Holiday 2004 saw the release of Dragon Ball Z Budokai 3, released exclusively for the PS2. The game's roster has been updated to include Dragon Ball GT, such as Super Saiyan 4 Goku and Vegeta, Omega Shenron, as well as movie villains such as Cooler and Broly. The fighting mechanics have seen a complete overhaul. Tapping the guard button right as an attack connects will perform a dodge. By holding the direction the opponent is facing while doing this, you'll quickly teleport behind them, assuming that you have enough ki. Knocking the opposition into the air and pressing the circle button will initiate a chase attack. Hitting the guard button just before you get knocked down to the ground will also result in less recovery time. Guard breaks have also been made easier to pull off, preventing one player from just turtling the whole match. Anyone who knows Dragon Ball knows that beam struggles are perhaps the most badass thing that the series has to offer. What does Budokai 3? Fucking beam struggles! If you press the L1 button, you'll begin to glow red. Your offense and defense will be buffed considerably. Abuse it, however, and you'll suffer from fatigue, opening you up to an easy special. Should you manage to hit your target with a heavy attack, you'll enter Dragon Rush mode. How it works is that you have 3 rounds. Both players have to hit a button, and if the defending player doesn't manage to pick the same button after 3 turns, they will suffer massive damage. It seems very one-sided, and it is. Trust me, it looks cool now, but once you get into some of the latest story fights, the AI loves to spam the hell out of it. This is also how you pull off your ultimate attacks. Not only do you feel the impact of each move, but for Dragon Ball fans, these are total eye candy. Nothing, and I repeat, nothing will match the excitement I get when I pull off a final flash with Vegeta and have said beam go off planet, cut back to the arena, and it's in flames. Oh hell yes, this is what I call a Dragon Ball game. Story offerings this time come in the form of Dragon Universe. You get to pick from a handful of fighters and experience the story through their perspective. The length of the story can vary depending on the character. Goku and Vegeta, for example, may experience all the way up to the Buu Saga, whereas characters like Krillin only go up to Frieza. You fly around a map of both the Earth and Namek as you take part in fights, as well as collecting the Dragon Balls with the help of the Dragon Radar. Finding them all will allow you to summon Shenron and grant yourself a special prize. This mode freaking rocks, if only for the fact that you get to see how the world pieces together. The only issue I've got regarding the story mode is the RPG elements. After every fight you gain experience points which you can upgrade your character's attributes. What ends up happening most of the time though is that the CPU will curb stomp you after a certain point. Power creep, essentially. How fitting. The only options you've got is either fight it out and hope you're skilled / lucky enough to win, or grind it out at these battle points. The latter being a total ball ache. It should really go without saying at this point, but I really like this game. The improved mechanics and cinematic flair to the attacks really sells this game as one of the best DBZ experiences out there. Even if you're not a fan of the show, I urge you to at least try it. Budokai 3 can be found on the PS3 and Xbox 360 alongside Budokai 1. Gee, I wonder why Budokai 2 was left out. Longtime composer Kenji Yamamoto plagiarised the soundtracks to the Trilogy, as well as DBZ Kai, and even some of the original Dragon Ball. It's a shame because what is here is bloody fantastic. If you do end up listening to the soundtrack outside of the gameplay, I would highly recommend that you look up and support the original artists too. There you have it, we've looked at 3 games, 2 of which weren't that great to be honest, but Budokai 3 to this day is considered the best of the best when it comes to Dragon Ball games. I know that's not really a massive statement, but hey, it's a great game. The only thing that really comes close is Tenkaichi 3, and even then I don't think that game is nearly as refined as this game is. Alas, we await the day where Budokai 3 is toppled from its throne. Next time on JGZ, there's a new fighting game starring Goku and friends that's taking the world by storm. Can it surpass that of Budokai 3? How many Gokus can they fit into one game? Will I ever stop disappointing my parents? Find out.
What the heck are you doing?
Nothing. Find out next time on JGZ.